This is the Kansas Kids episode, and I have got Nicolle Galyon on here. Nicolle and I have become friends in recent years, especially over our loved connection of Kansas. Nicolle, how are you?
I'm wonderful. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Now, most people are going to know you because you're a fabulous, fabulous songwriter, and you're really well known in town, but I genuinely have become to know you as Nicolle from Kansas.
That's how I want to be known. Yeah.
So I want to talk about not just Kansas in general, but really the purpose of this episode is people who have moved away from their home state when it was kind of unheard of and not something that a lot of people did and chase their dreams. So before we get into that though, like tell me kind of your origin story when you started writing and wanting to chase the dream of music and when you were first starting to think, okay, I don't think I can live here and do what I want to do.
So I went to this thing when I was in junior high with my mom called, at the time it was Fanfare, which is CMA Fest. I'm sure all of your followers know what CMA Fest is. But back when I was in like middle school, my mom and I went to CMA Fest, like Fanfare, 3 or 4 years in a row. And it was my first time on an airplane to go anywhere. And so we came to Nashville and I just learned about this place called Belmont. And I remember just knowing like, oh, I have to go there. I have to be there. Now, granted, I had never been to like any other city, but it was totally like grand design that I came to Nashville first and fell in love with it. So I always, at that time, like I just knew that I needed to be in Nashville. I didn't really know the why. I just was for sure that I needed to get here. And that is really the way it worked out. I got here, went to Belmont, and then I learned about songwriting. It was so weird because I grew up, like I have a job that I didn't know existed when I was growing up in Kansas. And I'm sure you're like in the same boat where you're like, I have a job that I didn't know I could have.
Yep.
You know, I mean, did you think that you were going to win a CMA award? You know, it's like, no.
And social media, no. Working in social media side of that, yeah, no.
Yeah, 100%. So I guess like Nashville is the thing that like spoke to me more than songwriting. And then I got here and met songwriters and I was like, I think I'm a songwriter because I was always a writer, like wrote in every way that I possibly could, you know, and whatever my hometown had to offer me, like yearbook, or I wrote for our small town newspapers in the summer. Like as a journalist, I'd go to the city commission meetings and like write the copy for the newspaper. Like I just loved writing.
Very creative.
So it makes sense now in hindsight, but at the time I didn't really know. But I love going. I actually just spoke to a high school in Kansas last week, and I like saying yes to those things because I feel like when they learn about my job, like the lesson is there are jobs that exist outside of the box that you don't realize, especially when you're like in a rural area and you're not quite as connected to like creative hubs. Your puppy. And so, yeah, that's kind of where it started. And I ended up getting some cool gigs along the way. Like I was a personal assistant in college for a booking agent.
Okay.
At William Morris. I did that job for 4 years.
Did you interact with a lot of people that you're like, what is my life right now?
Yeah. I got that job when I was 18.
Wow. So you very much were what is my life?
I was like, wait a minute. A year ago, I was the church pianist in Sterling, Kansas. And now I'm like throwing like parties at this big fancy house for all of these artists that I grew up listening to on the radio. And those, you know, those moments actually really like propelled me forward because I got to observe like so many guitar pulls at my boss's house, and all these artists would come in and just sit around the piano and sing or the guitar. And I'd be like, I started to feel that like ache of, oh, I want that in my life. And I think I can do that. And so, yeah, you just never know. Like, it's not just like A to B, like, oh, go to school, get this degree. That turns out to be your job. It's like, who would have thought that? I mean, most of my job was taking care of my boss's dog and driving him around. And somehow without that job, I don't know that I would be a songwriter.
Yeah. It was like all the different courses in life led you to where you are right now. When you were considering, when you're like, okay, I know I want to be in Nashville, when you're kind of having that conversation and that's starting to happen and you're about to move from this place, the only place you've ever known, home, what was it feeling like for you, and what was the experience you were having with other people as they heard you were choosing to move?
That's such a good question. Things that come to mind were like, I remember my high school like guidance counselor, you know, like you're like junior year and you're meeting, and like she'd never heard of Belmont and kind of didn't have any judgment over it, but was just like, you know, when you go in and you like get accepted to a school and you're like, you know, and you've done well in school and you've worked really hard, you have good GPA and your ACT and all that, and you want to be like, and I got accepted here.
And you're excited about it.
You're excited about it. There was just kind of like this blank of like, well, we don't know what that is. And so I remember just having to learn probably to just put blinders on and do my own thing. And it wasn't that hard for me. I've kind of always been like tunnel vision in a good way. I've been like locked in.
Yeah, when I get locked in, I know what I want and I'm going to go for it.
Yeah, I love to execute. So not people, but goals.
Yeah, okay. Clarify that one.
And so that was, and I do remember years later, my mom told me that she was probably the biggest champion for me, like going and taking the risk. And, you know, I mean, we couldn't afford for me to go to Belmont. You know, it didn't make sense on paper, and I'm getting a degree in music business. Like, whoever makes it in that, you know? And, you know, and I never knew it at the time, but I think my dad was really scared. And years later, my mom came back and she's like, you know, she's like, I had to really like champion you behind the scenes, like with your dad and with your grandpa. Cause like your grandpa, I was a volleyball player, and she's like, your grandpa loved watching you play sports. Like, he was so sad that you weren't going to go to college and play sports. And she was like, my mom just had my back in that way. And I never knew. And like, so I don't know. I'm glad that I didn't know that other people had doubts and it scared them, because I may have taken that on a little bit myself.
Yeah. Do you feel like, too, knowing that now as an adult, were you like, dang, I guess if you would have known, at the time that your dad had felt that way, do you think it might have pulled you back a little bit or questioned yourself, or were you still so tunnel vision it wouldn't matter?
No, I probably would have. I'm pretty headstrong. It probably would have made me like challenge it even more and maybe even want to move here more. Okay. Not fair. To spite him, but because it would have made me, we're like, all people are like mirrors, you know, and we're like constantly pinging off of each other, our thoughts. And when somebody says something, you're trying it on of like, does that make sense for me? Do I feel the same way? Does that resonate? And I think if anyone would have said, that's stupid, and I'm sure people in my class thought it or something, a few of them were like, what is she doing? I don't know that it would have, I would have absorbed it.
That's a good quality trait. Do you realize that now too? Like, oh, that's a really good thing that I have that ability to kind of block this noise out and just do what I feel is best for me.
Yes. And I think that I'm like, I can't take credit for being that way, but I know that I am that way. In fact, my best friend, we were just on audio message a few days ago, and she was like, I was trying to make a decision of like, do I commit to this or not commit? It was like a thing. And it was something around travel. And she just said, well, one thing that I know about you is of all of my friends, you have like the most sovereignty over your life, like where you do what is right for you. And maybe I do that even to a fault where I'm just like, maybe I disappoint other people sometimes, but I always tell my daughter this too. I'm like, somebody's going to get disappointed. Just make sure that it's not you disappointing yourself.
Okay, first of all, that compliment from your friend is amazing. Like, I bet so hearing sweet. That you were so thankful that not only do you feel that way, but somebody feels that way over your life.
Yeah.
And then also that you can now teach that to your daughter, and she gets that lesson very, very early instead of later on in life.
Yeah. And everybody's wired differently, you know, and I mean, as long as it's not hurting someone else, I think you doing the right thing for yourself just causes like a ripple effect of other people around you doing what's right for themselves. Like, I can't tell you the amount of friends that have like gone into the studio and made records later in life and stuff. And I think because I did, they were like, oh wait, that doesn't seem as scary because I know somebody that tried something like that. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
On that level of like you helping your daughter with her experiences in life, what's some advice you would have for somebody who is considering the big move? from everything they've done, and they want to chase their dreams, but they're so afraid to. What's something you would tell them?
Well, I don't know if it's advice, but it would be just like, just sharing that I was homesick for years. And I think when I've seen, like, my little brother moved here from Kansas, he's 17 years younger than me. And I remember telling him, I was like, just FYI, like, this place didn't start to feel like home for like 5 years. And I think that it's not advice, but I think it's helpful information, because I think when people do make a big move somewhere, even if it's just to go to college, it always appears like everyone else has found their place and you haven't. But really, everybody else is, not everybody, but most people are feeling that ache of, I haven't fully planted myself here. I don't feel established. I don't feel like I belong, and so I think just knowing that that's a common theme for people that have gone before you will keep you from talking yourself out of doing what is right for you, because I do think that loneliness can, like, just take you out, and you can feel like, I think that's just part of it. It's like the rebuilding your identity and all of that, and you kind of have to start at square one.
Yeah, and something I wish people would have told me is, yes, you can always travel back home, but you will miss things. There are times you will miss things back in your hometown, whether it be with your family or experiences, because you just can't make it back, whether it's travel, work, whatever related.
Yep.
And those were probably the hardest, most homesick moments for me.
100% same.
Like, because you and I both are super family oriented, and we love being very close with our family, and missing out on those things. I felt like I was missing out on experiences. So I often had to kind of have internal conversations where it's like, yes, but you are chasing this dream, and this is important right now.
Yeah.
And you make the time when it matters, and you will always find a way to make up for this. So it's almost like I also had to have this backbone for myself of, you deserve to chase this, and it's going to be okay, even if it feels like you're maybe not making the right choice family-wise, or whatever it might feel in that moment. Did you have that too?
100%, because I think it comes back to values, and if family is something that you value a lot, like, you want to show up and invest in that. But also then you have to ask yourself, like, what do I value with myself? And I think everything comes with a cost. And so it's just like, you kind of just, and there's no right or wrong to it. You just kind of have to look at it and go, okay, no matter what I choose, I'm going to sacrifice something. And I think it's also important to remember in those moments, like for me, there's one of my friends, I missed her wedding. I think it was when I was on The Voice, actually.
Which is a very good reason to miss a wedding if you had to miss one.
It was kind of an unexpected reason, but yeah. And then years later, she was like pregnant or something and had to miss my wedding, And so you think, oh, maybe you don't want to talk yourself into one thing feels off, so you throw the whole thing away. I think, like, most journeys are like literally like peppered with moments of like things that aren't comfortable. Just because it's not comfortable to miss something doesn't mean that that your life is necessarily going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And there's seasons. I mean, then there's like, now I'm in a season where I'm missing things in Nashville a lot, and those missing things back home and like just staying the course, I think kind of prepared me for this season where it's like, no, that's not for you right now,
Yeah. And what made you decide to make that call? Because you guys were living in Nashville for so long, and I know you still love it here, but you did move back to your hometown, and now you kind of split your time between both, which is definitely a big balance that you have to do. So what made you decide to make that call at this point in your career?
Well, a lot of things. It just felt right. And I think in hindsight, it's something that I always wanted to do, but so few have the opportunity because so many things have to line up logistically, I mean, full transparency, just like finances have to, you have to have the means to be able to split time between two cities and to be able to turn down opportunity, and all that stuff. And so we've been incredibly blessed, first and foremost, to be able to do it. I like the version of me that I am the most when I'm there. And I think when I think about the fact that like, we all turn into our mom, you know what I mean?
We do.
So I started to go like, what version of me would I want my kids to like turn into? And also like a lot of it comes back to motherhood, because I think the greatest gift that I can give my kids is for me to like get my anxiety, like, and my nervous system, like just get it right, and to get it calm, and to bring that into our home. And I, for so many years, and I stand by, like, as hard as I worked and all the things that I have taken on and all the things I'm still doing, but I had a life that was like a lot of pressure. And I just kind of got to a point where I was like, I cannot stick my finger up and say, hold on a second, like one more time while I'm on the phone, like to my kids, but like, hold on. I just felt like something just hit me where I was like, okay, I'm about halfway through their childhoods. How have we done this first half of the game? Go into the locker room at the halftime and go, okay, what are we going to do second half? What are we going to change on like the offense of our family? And I was like, okay, speaking of missing things, I mean, I've missed a lot of school pickups. I've been there for most of it, but I was kind of like, I think that we can have that here, and I just drew this like big geographical boundary between me and all the temptation to work all the time. And I don't know that I ever wanted to leave. It was just what was true for my story. Yeah. And I'm so glad that I did, because Nashville has been like, I feel like Dorothy, I came to Oz and like the world turned to color in a lot of ways. And I learned so much here, and I still am, but I think taking that home and like taking all of that stuff that I've learned and experiences that I have, I love giving, like taking that energy, almost like I collected like all of these little jewels. Yeah. And I took them back like Dorothy, to like my hometown, and now I'm kind of like sharing them there.
Yeah. It's like for you, Nashville had to be a big, important role in your life to be who you are in this space now back in your hometown.
100%.
And that's really special, because not only that, I think hearing that now back to what you had said at the very beginning was, I just knew I wanted to be in Nashville. I didn't know why. I didn't know what it looked like, but there was just this huge part of you that felt an importance to this city, this place. Mm-hmm. And I think there's people out there that feel that often. I remember so well, I had posted a picture in college with one of my friends, and it was, I'm sad to say bye, but like, I'll see you in Nashville sometime. I wasn't moving to Nashville. I didn't have any goals I knew I loved the city. Had never been here, but I knew for some reason I loved the city. Mm-hmm. I knew I loved country music, and that was it. But for some reason I kept saying, I'm going to live in Nashville. Wow. And even still, I got out of college, got a job back in my hometown, and I was like, okay, maybe that's just not for me. And then somehow, somewhere, it was like job opening. Oh, you're going down. Oh, you're getting the job. This is all happening very quickly. And I felt so compelled that I knew it before, almost like the universe was ready to give it to me. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And that kind of feels like you too.
Yeah, I think the older that I get, and maybe you feel this way too, but you look back and you're like, I knew more than I knew that I knew. Yeah. My friend Betsy always says, my feelings aren't in English yet. I can't put them in words yet. And I love think that. I think I had a knowing similar to you. Mm-hmm. It was a sense. I think I can sense things in my heart and my gut that my head can't quite understand yet. Yeah. But I trust that. And it's the same thing with moving back. It was like, even when people would ask me why, I would have answers, but I just knew that I had a knowing that that was the right thing, mm-hmm. or the next thing for us as a family and for me. And ask me in 10 years and I'll be able to actually in hindsight tell you, oh, well, I didn't quite know this yet, but I knew enough to get myself there and to live my way into it and to see all the whys. Like I'll tell you the whys later, you know?
Yeah. Yes. Oh, that's so good. I'm going to use that now. My, what did she say?
She's like, my feelings aren't in English yet.
My feelings aren't in English yet. I need that more often than not. Now, this is it's kind of related, but unrelated. I do want to talk to you a little bit about your husband too, if you're comfortable with that, because You guys also have a unique love story. I remember you saying at one point, again, we've been around each other so many times. We're like, I just never expected this one. So was it a similar kind of situation with him where something about you knew, understood, but maybe your brain was like, there's no way?
Okay, well, this is kind of on both themes of like Rodney, my husband, and also Kansas and small town. Rodney's also for those of you that like don't know him, he's from a very small town in Texas, even smaller than Sterling. Like Sterling's 2,500, Groover, Texas is 1,500. And I remember growing up having like at a very like preteen age, and you start to think about boyfriend or like, whatever. And I remember being panicked that I would never meet somebody that would like where I was from. Like that was a thing for me. Like I must have known that I was going to leave and go somewhere that was like more of a metro area. But I knew that it wasn't going to work if he couldn't, like if I couldn't bring him home, or he looked his nose down on my little small town, or, that. And so anyway, now I'm married to somebody who like he would call Sterling his, maybe not his hometown, but it might as well be because he loves it there so much. And maybe the lesson in all of that is like, we all know ourselves so much more than we realize. You know, I was too young to connect all those dots, but yeah, I mean, Rodney's older than me. He, had another marriage and kids before. And so like on paper, it wasn't like, that was like what I thought was going to be my future. But I remember that one of the very first conversations I ever had with him, and he said something about, we're talking about like small town or something, and he said something about the fellowship hall, which the fellowship hall, I don't know if you had that. Like I grew up in a Methodist church, and the fellowship hall is kind of like the gathering area that like isn't the sanctuary, but it's like where they would have a kitchen and they would put out folding tables, and like people, if they got married in the church, they would have like,
okay, I know what you're talking about now. I just didn't realize it had a name. But
that's what it was. Like, and he said fellowship hall, and I had lived here long enough to like really be in that like lonely of like, nobody really understands where I come from. And I felt like when I talked to him, I was like, you are my people. I didn't know he's my person yet.
Yeah,
but I knew
you're something in my life. I'm just not sure where.
Yeah, and he was honestly just kind of like a really good friend for a long time, and somebody that I think, and then through my job that I referenced before, we ended up in the same like social circles all the time. So we didn't really have, like, we had a lot of overlap in like seeing each other at a lot of stuff. But honestly, like we emailed a lot. Like I would email him like, hey, so I got this job and my boss says we're going here tomorrow and we're going to see these people. Like, what do you know about these people?
Oh, wow. And he was really like a good friend for you.
He was a really good friend. And he had done a very similar like thing where he was splitting time between his hometown and Groover, Texas, and coming here to write, which here we are like full circle doing that, again. But he like understood like the perspective that I had like as a new to Nashville person, and especially like coming from just the culture in the Midwest. And I remember one time I asked him a question. I told him what I was going to be doing, and I was like, what do you think? And he was like, just remember, he was like, you don't have to see things the same way as other people. You can have different beliefs than them and not judge them for it. Because I think I was like such a like conservative small town kid that things were a lot more black and white and right and wrong. And I hadn't quite leaned into that gray area of life yet that I think we all eventually get to. And then we really embrace that. And he was, I was like probably a self-righteous little like golden girl from hometown, thought I'd never done anything wrong. And he would call me out on my shit, and he'd be like, you need to get over yourself. Like people have different beliefs than you. And, and if you're going to be in this business and you're going to be around a lot of other people, you can be around things that are not right for you without taking on. And so those were kind of some of our early conversations was like, and he, at the time he was still farming with his dad. So it was almost comforting for me. Like I'd send him an email and be like, oh, I was on the tractor. And I'd be like, oh, that reminds me of home. So like, we just had so many, if we were like a Venn diagram, we just had so much overlap that it, I guess it was kind of like.
It was faded before you even knew it was coming.
Yeah.
At what point, because it was such a good friendship, were you like, oh crap, this is more than what I thought this was going to
Well,
be.
I remember realizing that I would call him, like, he was the first person I would call when something really great happened or when something really bad happened. And that, sometimes that's like your best friend as a girlfriend, or sometimes that's your mom. Like, and I felt like I had gotten to a point where he was that person. And I was like, okay, yeah, you're my person. And we weren't dating or anything. It was just like, we might as well be, because you're my person, you know?
Mm-hmm. Who had that conversation first? Who initiated that? Because it's always that touchy thing, because when you're friends and you're not sure.
I don't even think it was a conversation. I think it was just like a moment. And then, we're having some like really emotional conversation about something. And then I think I just said, well, because I love you, and I'm telling you, and it just like came out so naturally. And then you kind of can't go back, and then you can't unhear that. And you can't unfeel how natural that was and how true it was. And it was just like a matter of fact. So I remember that.
That's so cool though, that you guys had such a natural connection, not just as people who wanted to be together, but like as a friendship, that then it just was so seamless into that next phase.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he is my best friend in every way. I remember my mom had come out to visit me one time, and she had met him in passing. And then like a year and a half later, I was like, hey, so I'm dating this guy. And she's like, I knew it when I met him. That is the kind of, she's like, I knew at very least that's the kind of person that, it's like, I know you're my daughter. That's your kind of person. And
well, this is also why we become our mom, is because they often know us better than we know ourselves.
Yes. Yeah, they can see things. We're all like right here, and they at least have a more of like a aerial view of our life, and they can kind of see. I can feel it with my daughter.
I was going to say, do you feel like now you've kind of had that mom instinct and you're like, oh, now I get the bird's eye view all the time. I never had this before.
Yeah, I do. But my daughter is a lot more like Rodney. She's a little more mysterious.
Okay.
Than I was like so forthcoming and like a very open book.
Do you feel like your son might be more like you?
Yes. So
at least in pictures, I can feel that more energy.
Ford and I like wear our excitement, like when we want something, we wear it on our face. Like if we're disappointed, if we're excited, if we're very eager, very driven, self-starters, like high energy, have a lot to say. And Charlie is more like Rodney, where she's kind of like, hey, and it's so cool to me because I'm attracted to that personality type. So I'm like, good for you. It's going to serve you well.
Oh, Nicolle. Well, I mean, genuinely, I say this all the time, but I love talking with you so much. You for me, kind of like Rodney was for you, not in the same sense, but like you're a piece of home for me.
Same to you. I just texted you the other day asking for a dermatologist recommendation in Wichita, because I didn't grow up in Wichita and I don't really know many people there, but it's like my hub now for, it's where I go to Target and Whole Foods and Trader Joe's, and
it's your drive into town. It's your little trip.
I call it Richita.
Richita?
Because
it was never Wichita when I lived there, but please tell me why.
Well, I call it Wichita because, it's like there's different, like, there's different levels of like of what people feel like. Have you seen those memes of it's like, that you've like, you feel rich when you like get to a point where you like always buy like the guac and queso, or you always let yourself do something, that you didn't do growing up. And I think for me, like getting to go to Wichita and just like go spend a lot of money at Target is like
your meme of that.
It is my playground of like, okay, I'm going to the big city. I'm going to Wichita. I'm going to go spend a lot of money at like, there's not a lot of places to spend money around here, but I'm going to find a way.
Maybe your next venture is bringing some things to Sterling.
It's definitely on my radar. I think it's a long play for me. Like I'm really just observing right now for a while. I just like want to live there and like find the best way to maximize like my gifts and my resources to be able to give back to Sterling. And I do as much as I can. I'm going to speak to the sixth grade Faith Schneider's sixth grade class on Monday. We're actually going to do the St. Jude t-shirt picture together on Monday. So like, I just love doing, but I think there's some big things that I can do long term, but I just want to find what the right things are. Cause I don't want to like spread myself too thin. I want to find one like one or two really big ways to give back, you know. And Rodney's always like, you just need to like create what you want here. And I'm like, well, I'd really like a really good restaurant. But I don't know if I want to get in. But like, I don't know if I want to get in the food business. I'm a songwriter.
Maybe that's more of an investment than like the full, you know, you being involved.
Yes.
There's options to these things.
Yes. I think like I've started to have people come out and write with us in Kansas. And at first I was like a little like honestly insecure because I love it there and I see it with these rose-colored glasses, you know, like I look at a wheat field and it's art to me and it's home and it's comforting. But like other people, they might look at my little downtown and be like, what is this?
That's that childhood little wound that's in there that you felt all the time.
And but every time I have someone out, like they're like, I needed this. I love it here. There's something special about your town. And I do think that like certain places can kind of like have a spiritual like anointing to them, you know, like I think places have memories, and I think there's like some kind of like aura in Sterling that
well, but I also feel like it is attributed to you as well. You have the aura of that small town.
Oh, well, I know God put me on this planet to live in a small town because I can feel what happens to my spirit when I go to like in LA, and I don't know like if you thrive when you go, like my best friend, she goes to LA to come alive. I literally am so depleted when I go there, and like it's like when I can just see that water tower in my hometown in the distance, and I'm like 5 miles away, I feel like my heart expands, and like I don't know, like I'm just taking in oxygen. It's so good for me. And some people feel that way about the ocean, and I don't expect anybody else to feel that way about where I come from.
No, but it's because I don't know that people understand well enough about energy of people, but when you're around somebody with an energy of a deep feeling of something, it doesn't necessarily even have to be of themselves, but like if they feel so deeply and so securely about a thing or whatever it may be, you can feel that and you pick up on that and you're like, oh, I want to feel that too. Yeah. And I think that has a connection to you in general, just like you're this string that ties it together.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
I hope that I can, I guess, spread the gospel of the small town.
You are.
Every time someone comes, they're like, oh, I love it here, you know?
I do. And I'm so glad. And I seriously, I would keep you forever because we could talk about sunflowers and wheat fields all day long. We really could. Yes. But we have to save that for another time. I'm really glad that you are here. I want to end on one thing. For someone who is in this position right now that you and I were in, maybe they didn't have a soul calling, but maybe they're like, I have to move. This has to happen. What would you just kind of tell them? Like if they're contemplating every life decision and they're sitting here, maybe like this could be your daughter or your son one day and they're sitting here trying to decide if this is the decision to make. What do you think you would tell them?
That you already know what you want. I think if you're wrestling with it, you're fighting yourself. You're probably trying to talk yourself out of being you. I think usually I think we all know what we really want, and I think more often than not, we try to talk ourselves out of being us and just accept that is something that you want. And you know what happens if, my second part of the answer would be like, you know what happens if you don't. You don't know what happens if you do. And
that's so true.
That curiosity is what you need to lean into, of going, what happens if I do try it, you know?
Mm-hmm. I love that. Well, thank you, Nicolle, for all of your wisdom and for coming on and being not only a great representative of the state of Kansas, but also of small towns.
Thank you. Kansas forever.